If you're a good-looking kid or you've got a good voice, they expect you to be able to do it all. You may be good-looking and you may have a great voice, but if you don't have experience to go with it, you're just going to be disposable.
Bob Dylan has never shied away from voicing his opinions, often baffling critics and outsmarting interviewers. At 83, he remains unapologetically unpredictable. Renowned for reshaping music with his lyrics, Dylan has never hesitated to speak candidly, especially about other artists. While millions consider him an influence, Dylan's blunt criticism of bands he disliked,
not an idol, but we just heard his record. As I said, we listened to his album.
Often shocked fans and sparked feuds. Some of these opinions even led to lifelong rivalries. So, which bands made Dylan's personal blacklist? From rock giants to unexpected names, the legend pulled no punches. Join us as we explore the 6 bands Bob Dylan openly admitted to hating the most. Number 6. The Kiss Band. Bob Dylan has had a complicated relationship with various artists, but one of the most confusing ones is with the members of Kiss. Dylan and Kiss are completely different from each other. Yet, the singer of Blowin' in the Wind would express hatred for the rock band, their music, and even their fans one moment, only to love them the next. Bob Dylan claimed that Kiss fans were destined for hell. In his memoir, Gene Simmons, the bassist of Kiss, mentioned that a lot of false information about the band began to circulate in the Bible Belt states of the U.S. Many believed that the band were devil worshippers, and that the name Kiss stood for Knights in Satan's Service. In 1979, Bob Dylan didn't need to hear the rumors to think that Kiss were Satanists. He came to that conclusion all by himself after becoming a born-again Christian. His newfound faith started to show in his songs, and he viewed Kiss as the enemy that would taint the world with satanic music. He considered them a danger to rock and roll. Dylan's transformation began when a fan threw a cross on stage. He kept it in his pocket. After his next show, he went back to his hotel room, where he claimed to have experienced a vision of Christ. Dylan later recounted about his spiritual awakening in the late 1970s, stating that there was a presence in the room that could only have been Jesus. Jesus put his hand on him. It was a physical sensation, and he felt it all over his body. He felt his whole body shake. The glory of the Lord knocked him down and lifted him up. Dylan started incorporating Bible references into some of his well-known songs during that tour. Fans were confused by his sudden change in attitude and weren't shy about expressing their frustration. During his concert in Tempe, Arizona, on November 29, 1979, Dylan had a disagreement with an audience member who shouted, "Rock and roll!" Dylan angrily replied that if they wanted rock and roll, they could go down and rock and roll. They could go see Kiss, and they could rock and roll all the way down to the pit. The funny thing about Dylan's remark regarding Kiss and their fans is that the rock band actually influenced him years before he converted to Christianity. Kiss was the reason Bob Dylan decided to paint his face during the Rolling Thunder review. 4 years prior to his conversion, Dylan started his Rolling Thunder review, which was known for being a circus-like rock show. The purpose of the tour was for Dylan to perform in smaller towns, but it became most famous due to his unique appearance. During the tour, Dylan took the stage with striking white face paint and a wide-brimmed hat adorned with flowers. In Martin Scorsese's 2019 Netflix documentary, Rolling Thunder Review, a Bob Dylan story by Martin Scorsese, Dylan discussed about the face paint, stating that when somebody's wearing a mask, he was going to tell you the truth. When he's not wearing a mask, it was highly unlikely. Dylan also mentioned that he was inspired to wear the face paint after watching Kiss perform in Queens, New York City, when they were still playing in smaller venues. However, as reported by Ultimate Classic Rock, Kiss hadn't performed in Queens since 1973, meaning Dylan couldn't have actually seen them live. Nevertheless, Dylan probably knew about the band in 1975. It was nearly impossible not to, given their groundbreaking performances and equally creative stage costumes. In September 1975, just a month before rehearsals for the Rolling Thunder Revue kicked off, Kiss released their first live album, Alive, which later reached number 9 on the Billboard 200. Years after Dylan referred to Kiss fans as Satanists, he teamed up with Simmons. Together, they created a song titled Waiting for the Morning Light. If Dylan's disdain for Kiss raised eyebrows, his thoughts on another rock titan, Led Zeppelin, were even more surprising. Let's find out why. Number 5. Led Zeppelin. A meeting between the songwriter of Mr. Tambourine Man and Grant led to a tale that is now a part of classic rock history. This unexpected meeting at a Los Angeles concert in 1974 was mentioned in the biography that accompanied Led Zeppelin's box set. Fans were just as shocked by the exchange between the band's manager and Dylan. It's said that Dylan left Grant speechless after Led Zeppelin's manager introduced himself. This story has been shared for many years, and opinions are divided on whether Dylan's remark was a jab at the band or just a light-hearted joke. When introducing himself to Bob Dylan at a party in LA, Grant extended a friendly handshake. He introduced himself as Peter Grant, manager of Led Zeppelin. Dylan responded that he didn't come to him with his problems. Fans have differing views on whether it was a joke or not, with Dylan's humor often cited as a reason for his comment. Dylan has brought joy to the members of Led Zeppelin with his live shows, as in a chat with The Guardian, Plant mentioned that he had to wrestle with what he was saying. His music drew from Woody Guthrie, Richard and Mimi Farina, Reverend Gary Davis, Dave Van Ronk, and all these amazing American artists he had never heard of. Both Jimmy Page and Robert Plant expressed their admiration for the iconic songwriter, stating that he was taking in the nuances of America and presenting them without any hesitation, sparking a remarkable social awareness. In these Anglo-Saxon regions, people could only stare in awe, as they were unaware of the realities he was singing about. Dylan was the first to say, "Hello, reality." Page also commended the songwriter in an Instagram post, reminiscing about a moment he had while watching the songwriter perform at the Royal Albert Hall. Page wrote that in May 1965, he witnessed the brilliance of Bob at the Albert Hall. He played acoustic guitar and showered the audience with images and lyrics from songs like "It's All Right," "Ma, I'm Only Bleeding," and "She Belongs to Me," leaving everyone spellbound. It was a transformative experience. In 2013, Bob Dylan returned to the Albert Hall for the first of 3 nights, where he showcased tracks from his new album Tempest, along with some reworked earlier songs like "She Belongs to Me" and "Tangled Up in Blue." It was mesmerizing. After taking a jab at Zeppelin, Dylan didn't stop there. Next on his list was none other than the Beatles. Let's find out why he couldn't hold back his true feelings. Number 4. The Beatles. The Beatles and Bob Dylan had a complex yet productive relationship after they first met in a hotel room back in 1964. Even though they faced numerous musical and personal disagreements, both were the defining acts of an entire decade, forever changing the landscape of popular culture. Bob Dylan's impact on the Beatles went well beyond just introducing them to substances. His deep and thoughtful songwriting greatly influenced their musical growth, pushing the Fab Four towards more mature and experimental themes. On the flip side, Dylan also drew inspiration from the Beatles' creative take on pop music, using some of their methods in his own songs. However, despite their mutual respect and exchange of ideas, there were times when Dylan and the Beatles didn't see eye to eye. resulting in creative clashes and differing views on music and artistry. Interestingly, both groups viewed each other with a touch of envy, even with their successful careers. Dylan was celebrated as a critical favorite, often referred to as the musical messiah who seemed to have come from above to elevate the art form, while the Beatles reached a level of mainstream success that Dylan could only dream of. At the same time, John Lennon might have gladly traded places to have Dylan's esteemed reputation. When they first met, the two groups were on completely different sides of the spectrum. Dylan was a well-respected songwriter who was starting to take on the title of the voice of his generation with a bit of a sour attitude. He was admired by his fellow musicians, but he found it tough to reach the commercial success that Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr had achieved. Ironically, while the Beatles gained massive pop fame, their wish to be recognized as true artists was often overshadowed by their carefree commercial success. This meant that as both acts developed into their roles, they moved back and forth between being friends and rivals. Their fan bases might have overlapped, but they weren't really competing directly. Still, there was a noticeable tension between Dylan and the Beatles. Even though they both expressed admiration for each other, there were times when a sarcastic comment or jab would slip through in the music scene. Every time they released a new song, there was a chance to throw a little shade, and by 1966, the tension between Dylan and the Fab Four was definitely increasing. In 1966, Dylan couldn't help but voice his not-so-flattering thoughts on two Beatles songs. The songs he criticized were Michelle from Rubber Soul and the hit Yesterday from Help, which he called cop-outs. The free-spirited Dylan kicked off his rant against the Liverpool band by saying that he was not going to be accepted. But he would like to be accepted by the Hogtown Dispatch literary crowd who wear violets in their crotch and make sure they get all the movie and TV reviews, and also write about all the ladies' auxiliary meetings and the PTA gatherings. He said they were all in the same column. He further explained that he would like to be accepted by these people, but he didn't think he was ever going to be, whereas the Beatles have been. The interviewer took the chance to connect two of the biggest stars of the decade in one story and asked Dylan about his thoughts on the Beatles. Dylan responded, saying that he was just saying the Beatles have arrived, right? In all music forms, whether it was Stravinsky or Leopold Jake II, who played at the 5 spot, the Black Muslim Twins, or whatever. He went on to explain in a sarcastic tone that the Beatles were accepted, and people have to accept them for what they do. They played songs like Michelle and Yesterday, and there was a lot of smoothness there. Maybe he recognized the band's potential or was just feeling jealous, but Dylan didn't hold back when asked about Joan Baez covering a Beatles song. He stated that it was the thing to do, to tell all the teeny boppers he digs as the Beatles. And you sing a song like Yesterday or Michelle. God knows, it's such a cop-out, man, both of those songs. While calling the two songs mentioned a cop-out was pretty harsh. It seemed polite compared to how he felt about Norwegian Wood. This classic Lennon song was seen by Dylan as almost a direct imitation of his own style. Even though Lennon was always open about having a Dylan period in his songwriting, Norwegian Wood pushed Dylan to the point where he wrote a response song called Fourth Time Around. Although Dylan had only been a significant figure for a short time, many artists had already started to mimic his style. Naturally, when a musician gains admiration, this comes with the territory, and few artists experience imitation more than the Beatles. Still, it was a tough reality for Dylan to see the Fab Four copying him. The similarities are hard to overlook as well. Prior to their famous meeting in New York, the Beatles' lyrics were never the main focus of their songs. The band even admitted that they were fine with using nonsense lyrics, if they fit well and enhanced the melody. Storytelling was not their strong suit until Dylan influenced their perspective. John Lennon, in particular, was greatly inspired by Dylan's songwriting, which prompted him to adopt a more narrative style than he had used before. There is certainly a hint of pettiness in Dylan's comments. However, the fact that he backed up his words with a song that essentially presented a more refined version of Norwegian Wood is quite impressive. Dylan even left Lennon a not-so-subtle hint at the end of the song, knowing that his biggest fan would definitely analyze the piece. The final two lines feature him singing, "I never asked for your crutch, now don't ask for mine," which clearly expresses his feelings about Lennon idolizing him. Over time, Dylan's perspective on the Beatles changed, and his impact on them turned into a point of pride instead of a burden. He collaborated a lot with George Harrison to enhance his creativity during the last days of the Fab Four, and they eventually became bandmates in the Traveling Wilburys. The Beatles clearly looked up to Bob Dylan during their career, often calling him their idol. But like any friendship, they had their disagreements, mostly about their music. The rivalry, although mostly one-sided, pushed both groups to elevate their artistry. For the Beatles, Dylan inspired them to write deeper, more thoughtful songs, while for Dylan, being associated with the Fab Four helped him reach a wider audience. This relationship, though sometimes tense, ended up being beneficial for both, boosting the legacy and influence of these two iconic figures in pop culture. The Beatles may have felt Dylan's fire, but they weren't the only ones. Counting Crows also found themselves on the receiving end of his biting honesty. Let's find out what sparked it. Number 3. Counting Crows. In 2013, Counting Crows collaborated with the Wallflowers, the band led by Jakob Dylan, for the first time since 2001, as reported by the Los Angeles Times. If you're a fan of either band, you likely know that they've had a friendly professional relationship for years. They even worked together in the studio when the Wallflowers invited Crows frontman Adam Duritz to add vocal harmonies on 6th Avenue Heartache back in '96. Duritz later recounted that he was probably in the studio for a total of half an hour. He walked in, sang it, and walked out. Although his studio time with the Wallflowers was brief, the personal connection Duritz has kept with Jakob Dylan over the years has lasted. Duritz had always expressed his admiration for Jakob's father, the folk icon Bob Dylan, so the idea of getting close to someone connected to his hero must have been quite a thrilling thought. Unfortunately, the feelings weren't exactly mutual, as Bob Dylan had also been vocal about his views on Counting Crows, and they weren't positive. Adam Duritz once shared that he didn't always rush to meet his idols because he didn't know what to say to them, and he didn't want to stand in front of them like an idiot. And he had done that with some of his idols. Instead, Duritz decided to express his admiration for Dylan through a song, declaring outright that "I want to be Bob Dylan" in the Counting Crows' 1993 hit Mr. Jones. The lead singer has been a huge fan of Dylan for his whole life, and people who listen to Counting Crows a lot can definitely notice some similarities in their music. Duritz is known for blending deep poetic elements and a dreamy quality into his lyrics, so one might think these two songwriters would get along really well. Bob Dylan even won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2016. But that was not how it is. In fact, Dylan once made a really harsh comment about Duritz and his band that hit the Crows hard, as reported by Far Out magazine. Bob Dylan, despite all his talents, was famous for not holding back when he spoke his mind. While musicians and artists often say people shouldn't let others' opinions bother them, it's tough not to take it personally when the greatest songwriter ever has something to say. In a chat with Vulture, former guitarist for Dylan, Cesar Diaz, talked about a moment he had with the Tangled Up in Blue singer when Counting Crows came up. He told Bob that the guy from Counting Crows wanted to be him, and this was before they released that Mr. Jones song. Bob Dylan replied that they were a piece of crap. Despite Dylan's harsh words, Adam Duritz and his band didn't let it get to them, as they've had a really successful career for nearly 30 years. Counting Crows may have faced Dylan's criticism, but his clash with Rolling Stone was on an entirely different level. Let's find out why this feud became unforgettable. Number 2. Rolling Stone. When one does something once, people expect it again. In the case of Bob Dylan, he had done just that, releasing powerful albums and singles that seemed to reflect the spirit of the times multiple times during the 1960s. However, his 1970 album Self-Portrait didn't resonate with many, including Rolling Stone magazine. As the 1960s came to a close, Bob Dylan intentionally stepped back from his unofficial role as the voice of a whole generation, a title he never wanted in the first place. Following a motorcycle accident in 1966, he significantly slowed down, releasing 2 more subdued albums, John Wesley Harding and Nashville Skyline, creating demo recordings with the band that became widely bootlegged, and stopped touring except for the occasional special performance. Instead, he focused on his wife Sarah and their expanding family. In 1969, he moved them to New York City after the peacefulness of his time in Woodstock was disrupted by scene chasers and intrusive fans. While working at Columbia Studios, he started piecing together the songs for the album he would name Self-Portrait. Sometimes he recorded with session musicians, and other times he did acoustic guitar and vocal recordings that he sent to Nashville for string overdubs. Many of the tracks were covers, and the original songs often had very few lyrics. By adding some tracks recorded with the band at the Isle of Wight Festival in August 1969, Dylan ended up with enough material for a double album. He created an abstract self-portrait for the cover to fit the self-portrait concept. The album was released on June 8, 1970. People were confused, including a reviewer from Rolling Stone. Then commenced Greil Marcus's review of Self-Portrait in Rolling Stone. At that time, Marcus was among the initial critics who recognized the significance and depth of rock music. Many of these critics were drawn to Rolling Stone, which quickly established itself as the leading rock magazine after its launch. That particular line has been cited so frequently that a lot of people think Marcus's review was nothing but a harsh criticism of the album. However, the reality is that it was far more complex than that. Instead of writing a typical record review, Marcus chose to break it down into several individual observations, some of which veer off into discussions about autorism or the poet Rimbaud. Nevertheless, Marcus's main argument appeared to be that Dylan had essentially surrendered, not living up to the caliber of the music he had produced in the mid-60s. He did commend certain tracks on the album, but an overall feeling of disappointment permeated the review. It seemed that Marcus wasn't too far off, and Dylan may have been more aware of his critique than one might think. Based on various interviews conducted over the years with Dylan and others, it was reasonable to conclude that Dylan was affected by the Rolling Stone review and the general response to the album. Ultimately, it seemed that his intention behind creating Self-Portrait had been undermined. Dylan expressed that he was becoming more and more frustrated with being seen as some kind of savior, and he didn't want his fans to rely on him for answers he felt unqualified to provide. He intentionally created Self-Portrait to relieve both himself and his fans from these expectations. His thought process was that if he didn't deliver what they desired, they would stop searching for it. However, the review only highlighted his error in judgment. If anything, critics attacked even more fiercely, using his mid-60s records as a sort of mockery. Self-Portrait hadn't deterred them. It seemed to only increase their appetite for criticism. In response, Dylan quickly returned to the studio to complete a set of original songs he had started during the self-portrait sessions. These tracks became the album New Morning, which hit the stores just 5 months after the release of Self-Portrait. Although the new album didn't completely satisfy all the critics, it was at least a more conventional Dylan album for everyone to dissect. In 2013, another Self-Portrait was released as part of Dylan's ongoing bootleg series of reissues. This release received quite positive reviews, including from this writer. In a clever twist of fate, the liner notes were written by none other than Greil Marcus. This either shows that Bob Dylan believes in forgiveness, or he follows the saying about keeping your enemies close. The dispute with Rolling Stone was heated, but Dylan's cold stance towards Simon and Garfunkel cut even deeper. Let's find out why. Number 1. Simon and Garfunkel. Paul Simon and Bob Dylan wrote some of the most cherished songs during the 1960s and 1970s. However, these two songwriting giants didn't always see eye to eye. As Simon mentioned to Rolling Stone in 2011, he usually came in second to Dylan, and he didn't like coming in second. Fortunately, they managed to resolve their differences when they toured together in the late 1990s. It all started when Simon and Art Garfunkel performed on the stage of Goethe's Folk City in Manhattan's Greenwich Village in March 1964. This was a significant event for Simon and Garfunkel, who were on the verge of completing their first album, Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m., for Columbia Records. While Simon played guitar and he and Garfunkel harmonized, a loud nasal laugh interrupted their performance. It was unmistakable, and Simon noticed that it was Bob Dylan at the bar chatting with the New York Times music critic Robert Shelton and laughing. Simon admitted he was hurt. Simon later reflected that Dylan was laughing during his performance, someone he admired. He had been a fan of Dylan's music since he first heard his album in 1962. He and Garfunkel even featured one of Dylan's songs, The Times They Are A-Changin', on their debut album. And now, Dylan was laughing loudly while they were on stage. This marked the beginning of the rivalry between the two singer-songwriters, which ultimately came to a close with their tour at the start of the 21st century. Bob Dylan and Paul Simon had met shortly before the significant concert. Carla Rotolo, who is the sister of Dylan's girlfriend Suze Rotolo, was the one who introduced them, but their first meeting was awkward. Neither of the two men spoke much, according to Bob Dylan, Outlaw Blues. The situation at the concert only made things worse. However, Robert Shelton mentioned that he and Dylan were not laughing at Simon and Garfunkel's music that night. He remembered that they had been drinking quite a bit and were just feeling giggly. He recalled they weren't laughing at the performance, but Simon was furious. After the concert, Simon seemed to get back at his rival, or at least that was how it looked to many people. In 1965, he released his first solo album in the UK titled The Paul Simon Songbook, which included the song A Simple Desultory Philippic. This song appeared to poke fun at Dylan's music and lyrics. Later on, it would be included in Simon and Garfunkel's third album, Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme. Even with the tensions between them, Simon had a lot of respect for Dylan, especially in the early days. Simon told Rolling Stone in 2011 that, in the very beginning, when they were first signed to Columbia, he really admired Dylan's work. The Sound of Silence wouldn't have been created if it weren't for Dylan, but he lost that feeling around the time of The Graduate and Mrs. Robinson. They didn't feel folky anymore, he explained. Paul Simon poked fun at Bob Dylan for going electric and sparking the folk rock movement, even doing a short impression of him on stage, as mentioned in Homeward Bound, The Life of Paul Simon. In response, Dylan acted like he didn't even know who Simon was. In May 1966, he told New Musical Express that he had never heard of him. However, over time, both Dylan and Simon started to show a bit of respect for each other. In a 1984 radio interview with Bert Kleinman, Dylan said that Paul Simon has written some good songs. He thinks America is a good song, and he thinks The Boxer is a good song. He further explained that he thinks Bridge Over Troubled Water was a good song. In 1999, they even toured together, and while the reviews were mixed, Rolling Stone described their performance as half historic, half train wreck. It seemed like the two legendary musicians had made peace. Still, Simon reached out to Dylan for a duet on his 2011 solo song, So Beautiful or So What? Simon believed that Dylan's older voice would be perfect for the line. He said it was strange the way they were ignorant and how they seek out bad advice. But as Simon told Uncut that year, he sent it to him, but he didn't hear back, and he didn't know why. So it seems there might still be some unresolved tension between the two songwriters. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.